Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we're going to be looking at a very exciting Gyarados card that's going to be coming rather soon. Now, it is coming out in Japan's Sun and Moon free set, which means it's going to be coming out for us in Burning Shadows in August, and it's looking pretty good. It is a water Pokemon, which means it's hitting for weakness against Volcanion, which is always nice, especially given that that is one of the best decks around at the moment, and being a water type means he's got a whole bunch of advantages. We've got Aqua Patch, which allows you to attach a water energy from your discard to one of your benched water Pokemon. Kind of like Dark Patch, but for water Pokemon. We've got Brooklet Hill coming out in Guardians Rising, which allows you once per turn to search for a water or a fighting Pokemon. Here we're very much thinking water, and putting it on your deck, which is going to help you get your Magikarps out. And you've also got Rough Seas, which of course is going to be competing against Brooklet Hill to be your stadium of choice here. You get to heal 30 damage from each of your Pokemon per turn. So, each of your water Pokemon per turn. Or lightning, I suppose, but again, we're very much thinking water here. Speaking of lightning, you are weak to lightning, which isn't bad, because except for the odd Raichu deck, lightning is not a huge type right about now. Now, Tapu Koko in the upcoming Guardians Rising set is potentially a very good card. Maybe that will see a whole bunch of play, but as it stands at the moment, lightning is one of the better weaknesses to have. Now, one thing that stands out straight away with Gyarados is the HP. 150 HP is good for a stage 1. Heck, 150 is good for a stage 2. The non-GX stage 2 I always give as an example of high HP is Dragonite, and he's only got 160. 150 is better than something like Garchomp, or indeed Greninja, and he's a stage 1 Gyarados, so pretty nice. He has got a massive retreat cost of 4, but it doesn't really matter. You're only going to have one Gyarados out at a time, more on that in a moment, so you're not exactly going to want to get him out the active very often, and let's face it, maybe you can use Heavy Boots to get even more HP. I mean, you won't, you'll be playing Choice Band, but maybe you could. Now, one thing we need to mention at the beginning here is Magikarp. Magikarp has a very, very cool attack. At the moment, we're stuck with this Magikarp, which isn't very good. This Magikarp is potentially slightly better. Now, we've still got the absolutely pitiful HP, which means that Decidueye is going to get a KO with 2 Feather Arrows, not ideal, and even weird techs like Absol are going to get nice, easy KOs, so not particularly ideal. Although I do want to know how that Magikarp is quite so high up in the air. Not the most important question right now, but it's bugging me, and I'd quite like to know. Anyway, the attack of Magikarp: 1 water energy, 10 damage, flip a coin. If heads, prevent all effects of attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. And the wording as we have it at the moment, and it always might get changed when it gets translated, but the wording we have at the moment means even if your opponent switches the active, they still won't be able to damage Magikarp. They'll have to do something like play a Lysander or an Escape Rope. This is not an immense attack, but every so often, if there's nothing you can do, you can use this attack, and if you hit a heads, you really could be saving yourself the game for one more turn. Although, of course, there is every possibility your opponent just plays a Pokemon Ranger, but no one's really playing that at the moment. Now, on to Gyarados. He's got a second attack. It's garbage. 2 water, 2 colourless, 160 damage, 190 with a Choice Band, not terrible. This attack does 30 damage to each of your bench Pokemon, which means if you've got any Magikarp on your bench, they're getting KO'd by Gyarados' attack. Not cool, Gyarados, not cool. But we don't like this attack, and this is not why we're playing it. We like the first attack. This attack does 50 damage for each Magikarp in your discard pile. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We have another Gyarados whose damage output is Magikarp dependent. Now, if this sounds a little bit familiar, it should. The most recent Gyarados we've got at the moment is the one from Ancient Origins. He's seeing quite a lot of play at the moment, And his attack does 30 damage per damage counter on each of your bench Magikarp. So the ideal here is that you have 3 Magikarp on the bench, each with 2 damage counters, and you use Team Magma's secret base to do this. And then you're hitting for 6 times 30 damage, which is 180. Although it does have a base of 30 damage here, so you're actually hitting for 210. And this Gyarados sees quite a bit of play. Now, the other Gyarados that this is very, very similar to is the old Stormfront Gyarados. Newer players might be unaware of this. Older players will absolutely be aware of this one. He had an attack for 0 energy, which did 30 damage for each Magikarp in the discard pile. So you would try and get 3 Magikarp in a discard, and then you'd be hitting 90 damage. Here, you're trying to get 3 Magikarp in a discard, and you're hitting 150 damage, but you need to use a double colourless. As a side note, the old Stormfront Gyarados would use the card Expert Belt to hit 110, and back then pretty much everything had 100 HP or less, so it was a spectacularly good attack. Anyway, back to this Gyarados. Now, you can have a maximum of 4 Magikarp in your deck. One of them has got to be under Gyarados to evolve him, so that means that you are hitting for 150 for a double colourless. Now, in theory, this isn't strictly true. At the moment, we have still got legal in the format Archie's Ace in the Hole. And if you play this, and it is the only card in your hand, you get to draw 5 cards off your deck, and you get to just put a water Pokemon on your bench, even if it's not a basic. So in theory, you could use Archie's Ace in the Hole to put Gyarados out, and then you could have 4 Magikarp in the discard and be hitting for 200. Let's be clear about this. In Expanded, you've got cards like Execute and Computer Search, which make this easier to do. Honestly, it's not very easy to do in Standard. Now, with Tapu Lele coming out in Guardians Rising, it actually does get a little bit easier, because now you can potentially play an Ultra Ball, discarding the 2 cards in your hand that you can't use or you can't play down right now. Then you search for a Tapu Lele. You play Tapu Lele as the only card in your hand, search for an Archie's Ace in the Hole, and then play it as the only card in your hand. And then you get your Gyarados, 4 Magikarp, and a discard. You're hitting for 200. This is an option, but for the rest of the video, I'm going to be assuming that you can't do this. And the reason is very simple. We know that you're going to be able to stream Gyaradoses with 3 Magikarp out of the way, because we're doing it at the moment with Ancient Origins. We don't know that you're going to be able to do this with Archie's Ace in the Hole, so I'm just going to assume that we're not doing it. Now, you can, of course, use Choice Band here, so you're hitting for 180 for a double colourless. And we've got Field Blower coming out, which will get rid of those pesky Fighting Fury belts. So all of these 180 HP or less EXs and GXs, think Tauros, Darkrai, Yveltal, and even Tapu Koko GX, will be going down. So even though Tapu Koko will KO you, you're trading 2 for 1. Now, cards that have more than 180, like Lapras, 190, or most Stage 1 GXs, like Espeon and Gumshoes, you won't be KOing, but you can, of course, play a Professor Kukui, and then you will be hitting for 200. Although bear in mind that needing to play supporters like N and Sycamore to draw cards, Lysander to take prizes, it really isn't practical to assume you're going to be able to play a Professor Kukui every single turn. And this is the big problem here. The biggest problem with this card is you're basically maxing out at 180 damage, 200 with a Kukui, but that's not going to be every turn. Take Mega Pokemon like Mega Rayquaza, Stage 2 GXs like Solgaleo. You're just not going to be getting KOs here. The good news is this is not a majority of the format. The bad news is, honestly, there will be games that are much more difficult. The other potential issue here, of course, is just the recovery. Because you've got to have 3 Magikarp in the discard every turn. Which means that you have your 4th Magikarp under the Gyarados. The Gyarados gets KO'd. And then you have to, every turn, recover a Magikarp so that you can evolve it. And, of course, if you recover the Magikarp, you can't evolve it the same turn. And that is maybe the biggest issue with this deck, because you're going to be attacking pretty much every other turn, or you're going to be attacking for 100, which is far from ideal. And if you've got a Magikarp sitting on your bench waiting to KO something the next turn when it evolves into a Gyarados, that means you've got a 30 HP Pokemon waiting on your bench, waiting to be KO'd, and you're giving your opponent a turn to do 30 damage to the bench and get the KO. And that really is the biggest issue with this Gyarados deck. You need 3 Magikarp in a discard every turn, which means you need to recover a Magikarp and then wait a turn to evolve it. Now, you do have 150 HP, and that is quite high. But when your opponent does get a KO, you're going to need something else to do for that turn. Now, the good news in terms of recovery is that we're getting Rescue Stretcher, and you can either grab a Magikarp or a Gyarados out the discard, or you can just shuffle 3 Magikarp into your deck, and you can even combine this with Brooklet Hill to search that Magikarp straight back out again. But we don't want to be hitting 130. Now, 130 for a double colourless is quite good, but you're still only hitting 130, and if you want to hit 180 with the choice band, then you've got to resign yourself to the fact that you're not getting a KO next turn, at least not with Gyarados. The big question here is it better than the Ancient Origins Gyarados? Well, the good news is that you're not leaving Magikarp on your bench with 2 damage counters on, so that gives you a better Decidueye matchup. The bad news is, with the Ancient Origins Gyarados, you've got Magikarp on the bench ready to evolve the next turn. With this deck, you don't. And even if you've got 3 Magikarp in the discard, you're still hitting for less damage. So unfortunately, it's not as good as the Ancient Origins Gyarados, but I'm still going to give it 3 Wassies. There's potential here. If you've got 2 Magikarp in the discard, 1 on the bench ready to evolve, you're still hitting 130 to EXs or GXs and 100 to everything else for 1 energy attachment on a stage 1. I've seen a lot worse. This is classic, put a couple in your binder, and that is classic free Wossie territory. Now, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. There is a comment section. Tell me what you think about Gyarados. Tell me if you think it's going to work, even though you can't really have 3 Magikarp in a discard and have 1 ready to evolve the following turn. Yes, I know you can use Wally, but that's not really practical to do every turn. Yes, I know you can use Archie's Ace in the Hole, but that's not practical to use every turn. If we had a good way of evolving, it would be a 4 Wossie card. Make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter @TheWossie, and the most important thing as always, look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.